After the election of 2019, there was a lot of what happened in the Red Wall. Why did it go this way? What exactly happened to turn what was once a traditionally very staunch Labour area to hold their noses in many cases and vote Conservative? Well, most of it just happened to be Boris Johnson, stuff that Boris Johnson was pushing, and unfortunately, for who knows whatever reason why, a lot of people just went, yeah, you know what? Don't like the Conservatives, but that Boris Johnson fellow, I kind of like him. So tell you what, I'll give him a chance. And well, the rest, as they say, is unfortunately history. But it's a history that a lot of people have refused to really learn or even acknowledge or simply ask the question, why would someone in the Red Wall, who may very well be working class, be really suffering under the very same policies that of a party that Boris Johnson was part of, suddenly decide not to vote for, well, shall we say, to vote for the very party that had imposed upon them austerity, among several other disastrous policies that was making their town, their situation, even worse. No one's ever really stopped to ask that question, or at least you don't really see that question being asked too much. And it is not a simple question to answer. There are a lot of people out there just going, oh, it was racism. No. Because if you want to say it's racism, then Britain should have an incredibly large racist situation, which you don't see. But that's the Red Wall. But interesting questions are now being asked about the Blue Wall, and we are getting some incredible analysis of what is going on in these traditional Tory areas known as the Blue Wall, which, if we look at polling, if we look at certainly what the Lib Dems are saying, and they've proved it in the local elections, they've proved it in a couple of by-elections as well, these areas could very, very well go from blue to yellow. And if that happens, well, the Tories are in a world of hurt. Because as we've said this before, just as Boris Johnson was in a balancing act, Sunak himself is in a balancing act. And it's one he cannot keep. Because he's got to, at least in the next general election, to at least hold on to the vast majority of red wall gains. That doesn't look like that's happening. Those very too much like those are going to go back to Labour. And in the blue wall, he's got to at least see off the Lib Dems. And looking at the analysis, looking at the polls, this seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. So the situation for Sunak is not looking good. And more interestingly, you are seeing an increased momentum for, well, the Lib Dems in these areas. So let's go have a look into some analysis to see what is going on in these towns. Why are they, as the article puts it, why are they falling out of love with the Tory party? So before we do get into this, though, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. Of course, down below, there's a link to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can well buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button, and of course, the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. And on with this. This comes from The Guardian with the title of "The Blue Wall Home Countries Are Falling Out of Love with the Tory Party." If you close your eyes and imagine an archetypal true blue Tory heartland, there is a good chance that your mind's eye will conjure up something like the close, quaint Surrey town of Godalming, with its boutique bakeries, the inviting tea rooms that dot the immaculate high street, still festooned with the Union Jack bunting from its coronation celebrations. Estate agent windows will feature very large detached houses with imposing long driveways. One even has an indoor swimming pool. Narrow, of course, the coral streets sit below the Tudor period facades, and at the bottom is a thriving thoroughfare. It is the obligatory Waitrose. It comes as no surprise to discover that the MP is naturally the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Yet, this seemingly chic of a conservative fiefdom is under concerted electoral attack. The fortress of Godalming is being besieged, and the nearby villages of Bramley and Brook are in the crosshairs. The gravel drives of the Harcombe and Chiddleford are no longer safe. Suddenly, no Tory stronghold in that area is deemed out of bounds. If you didn't know any of the politics, you would probably assume this was a hardcore Tory place, concedes Paul Fellows, a beaming Liberal Democrat candidate, as he talks of his latest tour of the Golding House Street. But almost all of these really chic conservative places have not been so conservative for a little while. Unlikely as it may have once seemed, Hunt's southwest Surrey constituency, in the Tory hands since its formation in 1983, has now become one of the bricks in the blue wall of the affluent pro-Remain Tory constituencies that the Lib Dems believe they can dislodge. It would certainly put Hunt at risk of one of those humiliating election night oustings. And the attention on Hunt will only grow after the most obvious candidate for electoral defeat, the former Prime Minister Dominic Raab, announced that he would not contest his more marginal Surrey constituency of Esher and Walton at the next election. Back in 2017, Follows joined the Godalming Town Council. He was the only non-Conservative on it. Now, the Tories have just 20 seats, and over the same period, the Tories on the local Waverley Borough Council has also dwindled from about 50 to 10 after the disastrous local election results last month. Fallows says that it is the chaos of Boris Johnson's leadership, followed by the full-scale implosion of Liz Truss's tenure, that have catalysed a very much longer-term delay of the foundations of this blue wall mainstay. Hunt's 8,817 strong majority is large, but it is at risk should Rishi Sunak fail to reverse his party's recent fortunes. And here's the thing. He has very much failed, I think, and continually failing to do that. So there is a big chance that the more we get on, the more Sunak is seen as a lame duck. And we've already said just how weak he is as a prime minister. And you've seen all the rebellions time again. You've seen the whole, Australian trade deal written on the back of a loo roll. That's going to come up at this next Wednesday's PMQ question times. How is Rishi Sunak going to help defend farmers? Honestly, Labour, the Lib Dems have got so much ammunition they can just rip into them with, and the next general election is going to be it's going to be pretty brutal. I'm not going to lie. So, the values of the people here have always been what they are now, says Fellows. That's pretty centrist, pretty moderate, and pretty tolerant, pro-European, pretty compassionate and reasonable, very well educated. And what they've seen is their party move to a really right-wing group. And it doesn't matter how reasonable Jeremy Hunt can come across on occasion. It's not just campaigning from the Lib Dems who claim that something significant could be brewing in these seats. It can be found across the home countries in the southeast of England. Many Conservatives are also concerned that their party's desperation to win the sways of traditional Labour red wall seats in the Midlands and the North, that they have neglected these seats at the other end of the 2019 electoral calculation, which is what we said. It's this balancing act. Boris seemed to be able to at least maintain this balancing act. Sunak can't. Sunak is walking along a tightrope and he's trying to keep the spinning plates spinning. It very is quickly looking like he cannot keep them spinning. So its embrace of Brexit, the culture wars, has never played well among the blue wall voters. They won, but but the threat of Jeremy Corbyn kept them within the Tory lane last time. They have argued that Keir Starmer provides less of a perceived threat, while raising the mortgage costs and NHS problems are now impinging on the lives of these voters. And according to the calculation by Oxford University's Professor Ben Anselm, the Southwest Surrey seat would now fall to the Lib Dem hands on national polling averages. And to make matters more perilous for Hunt, the constituency is being redrawn, which could make it more marginal. It is clear that these are the kind of Sunak sympathetic, Sunak curious voters, says Ashnell. A full Sunak approach, which was less stop the boats and more stop the culture war, might work. The problem is it will lose other parts of the country. The electoral sheet leaves either the feet or the head uncovered. And you saw it. Boris Johnson was able to spin these. He was able to talk about, Brexit, leveling up, all this stuff that was going to come at once. Sunak can't. Sunak is to blame. Remember, there's that clip which I've said if I was in Labour HQ, I would be making sure come election time that video of him saying that he was taking money from deprived areas in the north should be played on repeat constantly. Just absolutely every single moment of every single day that is played constantly, and Sunak should be put to test for that and made to ask for that. And the other, Conservative MPs that are in those areas. Well, hold on, we're in one of those really poor areas that Sunak says he's taken money from. Why should we vote for you again? So, them trying to defend these two places rather than, so we say, make good policy for all the country has been very much their downfall, and they are going to get absolutely, absolutely tarred and feathered for it, I think, because you cannot defend two of these places at the same time. Because if you go back to defend your blue wall, you lose the red wall. If you stay and defend the red wall, then it looks like you lose the blue wall. So it is not good. It is not a good electoral position that the Tories find themselves in. So the talk among some Tories in Parliament is becoming apocalyptic, with one saying, "I'm worried about the blue wall more than anything." One former cabinet minister said to the Observer recently, "I really think there is a chance what will happen to Labour in Scotland in 2015 could happen to us in the blue wall at the next election. What are we offering these voters now?" Others, though, are less alarmist, but do share much of the same sentiment. "I do think we've become somewhat cavalier, and that we might actually lose closely the call of the Home Countries vote," said Ed Vaizey, a long-time minister under David Cameron and now a Tory peer. "To a certain extent, we've risked what Labour experienced in Scotland and arguably in the North, just assuming that these voters will continue to vote for us." It doesn't necessarily think that there's a large Liberal Democrat surge going to happen in the Southeast, but I do think that mainstream Tory voters need to feel that they've got a government that cares about them. Well, I can very clearly say that they don't care about those voters either. But there you go. The problem emerging in these affluent Liberal Tory seats comes with a parallel debate over the tactics raging amongst Conservative MPs. On one, the One Nation wing, some want to take a more muscular stance with the right of the party. Others want to maintain a softer approach, cajoling Sunak about his team behind the scenes. They point out that while the blue wall may be wobbling, that their wing of the party is better represented in cabinet now than it ever has been for years. Hunt himself is now the Chancellor. Just last year, he failed to secure the significant support to enter the leadership contest. Elsewhere, though, figures from the One Nation group of Liberal Tory MPs, Gillian Killing, Alex Chingle, Victoria Penders, Tom Tugendhat, are now all around the cabinet table. And while Liberal Tories do regard Sunak himself as one of the right of the party, an orthodox Thatcherite as one calls him, they also view him with somewhat relief and credit him with restoring order and moderation, qualities that they were desperate to see. However, despite this recovery in terms of power from within the government, some on the Liberal wing say that the party is suffering the delayed effects of declaring war on them during the years of Brexit infighting. "A lot of moderates were booted out," points out one former minister. "People like Nicky Morgan. David Gooch, Rory Stewart. People who carry the real heavy heft in the party are no longer on the front line of politics. Gooch himself is not panicked about the Tory prospects in the Blue Wall at the next election, nor does he see long-term problems looming. Obviously, local election results were pretty terrible, he says. In my view, it is the blue wall that is going to crumble, but it is not going to collapse next year. The Conservative Party's got a real long-term problem in the home countries, and Rishi Sunak is perfectly capable of trying to appeal to the blue wall seats, but he's the leader of a party that people have seen over a quite period of long time heading in a particular direction. Those memories are not going to disappear quickly. There is an element of long Boris about it. I like that. Long Boris. That is certainly true. The COVID inquiry, I think that is going to play a lot into the next election, sure. So, given the turbulence, of course, in 2016, the Tory party's embrace of Brexit and its iconoclastic radicalism that ended in the Truss breaking the record for the shortest serving Prime Minister, it should come as no surprise that the small C Conservative home countries do feel ruffled. Even without the demographic changes and the cost of living issues, the government would be struggling. Lib Dem canvassers also report finding more Labour voting young couples in Goldham who have moved out of London than they can also be targeted now as potential tactical voters. So, on top of that, the Liberal wing in Parliament has also been about the fact that the stock of traditional voters is not being replenished. The recent report of the co-authored Bim Alford and the MP in the similar besieged Blue Wall of Hitchin and Harpton has found that young voters who once turned to Conservatives as they progressed in their careers are not making that same journey. This is something, again, very true. We are seeing this what used to happen of people who used to live there did used to turn Tory. This is where the whole thing of, oh, you grow out of it. You're a leftist. Oh, you'll grow out of it. You'll get over. You'll grow out of it. Well, we're seeing less people do that because they've seen years of this party that offers them nothing, that has given them nothing, and has given them, next to nothing. So why should they continue to vote for them? Why should they turn blue? So it found that just 21% of 25 to 40-year-olds, or the millennials, would actually vote for the Conservatives today. In the 2010 election, the Tories had been the most popular party among that age bracket. And in 1979, Margaret Thatcher won amongst the under 30s. Millennials are the first demographic cohort not to become more right-wing as they age, Altham wrote. They are failing to acquire many of the attributes that have traditionally moved voters rightwards: home ownership, secure and stable employment, and starting families. Gork has also another fear about a development that also may pull off young voters even more. Instead, I think still hanging over us is that what is going to happen in the event of a Conservative defeat at the next general election, followed by a vacancy for leadership and a party membership that is going to get its say. And that is true. That is what is going to be the hilarious aspect. What happens after that Conservative defeat, that vacuum of leadership? Because Sunak isn't staying around. As soon as the Conservatives get defeated, he is moving on. I wouldn't be surprised if, like the morning after, he announces he's stepping back as leader, because he ain't gonna stick around. That's for sure. But it continues. It may seem implausible that the right wing won't have at least one candidate that goes through to the membership. They've got a very good chance of winning it. So the medium-term prospects for the Liberal part of the Conservative Party is still very worrying. But back in Goldham, there is some Tory hope. One voter tells a Lib Dem canvasser that he will stay loyal to the Tories, whatever the problems besetting the country are at the next election. But there are plenty of warning signs too. Debbie and John, an articulate couple looking after their grandson, are scathing about the childcare and mortgage costs their daughter now faces in the town. There is no affordable alternative here, says Debbie and John, and they point out that Sunak opted to retain Suella Braverman, one of the right's probable next election candidates, as Home Secretary. Elsewhere in the town, there's John Pell, a retired insurancer. He said he would be voting tactically in his seat to remove the worst government in my lifetime. It is no wonder then that within 18 months at the most potential of the next general election, Liberal Tories are wanting to speak up. Damien Green, the chairman of the One Nation caucus of Tory MPs, has urged Sunak to try to ensure that the cricket pavilions and village fates of the home counties are kept in mind as he tries to battle and rescue the party's fortunes. Keeping voters in the blue wall with us is about showing that the Conservative Party is not populist, he says. It's realistic. It's got an economic policy. It will bring down inflation and therefore make mortgages more affordable in the long term. But at the time, it is showing that he has little aptitude to the world, which is so optimistic about the outward looking, probably opportunity for people. These are the things that the Tory party actually needs to be saying if it is to keep that appeal. If we appear to be sour and old fashioned and pessimistic, then these sort of voters will be turned off. So, yeah, I agree. That's very interesting information there, especially the interviews, because you've got people who are completely turned off. And as we said, you've got by-elections. You've had the recent local elections where you've seen like a disappearing 10%. Just and what's worrying is the right wing know about this. They know as soon as the next election comes, they know that they've got their chance and that they get to like the final two. They can just pull a truss, just go and start promising everything they wanted. And that will turn off more of those more of the liberal Tories, more of like the more centrist Tories. That they are in a real bind. They are absolutely in a real electoral bind. And it's wonderful to see. It's so wonderful. But the more this happens, the more it is good for us electorally in the long run. And potentially, hung parliament. If it is a hung parliament with the Lib Dems and Labour, so be it. I'm not going to cry too much over that. I think it will be good. I think it will be good to certainly see more sort of progressive policies come in for more sort of, the more the centrist parties. Yes, it's not going to be maybe as progressive or as leftist as we want. But as I've said in politics, you don't get everything you want. You never get 100% of everything you want. Sometimes you'll get 30% of what you want. But as I've said before, 30% is better than nothing. Because if you've got another Tory government, well, you'd get nothing. So that's it sometimes. And that is politics at the end of the day. You've got to look at where you can win, where you can get good policies, and what you can do to move on forward from that. So that would be sort of my takeaway message from this. If you are on the left, if you are, depending where you are, don't be disheartened. We are probably entering into, I think, a really good period where we can, if we look at what we want to achieve, what we want to set out, there are open paths to us. As I've said before, Labour for PR used to get laughed at, but they have done such good work in what they do. It's possible. There's so much possibility out there, and I think that the more people realize that it's about being part of your party as well, so that you can have an influence on your party. Who your MP is, what they're going to do, engage with your MP. I would hope that at least there is a realization that we have to re-engage with our politicians and in politics, as much as many people don't like to. You have to. Politics isn't just a once every 4 or 5 years thing. It happens every day. You've got to sort of keep yourself engaged, keep on reading, even though you might not like, Keir Starmer or whatever. It's going to be a damn sight better than the Tory party. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.